Alexa-powered smart speaker and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Recalling the response from Harvard to the Supreme Court's decision last week in the college admissions case. Harvard's incoming president, a black woman named Claudine Gay, had this to say.
The Supreme Court's decision on college and university admissions will change how we pursue the educational benefits of diversity. But our commitment to that work remains steadfast. It's essential to who we are and the mission that we are here to advance. For nearly 9 years, Harvard vigorously defended our admissions process and our belief that we all benefit from learning, living, and working alongside people of different backgrounds and experiences. We will comply with the court's decision, but it does not change our values.
Mm-hmm. Meaning we'll work around it. Yeah. All you need to do is have a diversity statement in the application and eliminate test scores, and we'll be able to figure out how to get to where we want to be. And the point here is that Claudine Gay, just as Ketanji Brown Jackson, just as Eddie Glaude, who's omnipresent on MSNBC, Princeton professor, they're all examples that belie what they say. They've all achieved the heights of their professions in the law and academia, and yet their message to those who have a long way to go, like they had a long way to go and they made the journey, is we could do it, but you couldn't. Well, what kind of message is that? For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Bob Woodson, founder and president of the Woodson Center and 1776 Unites, the author of Red, White, and Black, Rescuing American History from Revisionists and Race Hustlers. Bob, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Glad to join you and Amy.
Always good to have you. And so, you know, I know you nobody does it better than you in sort of extolling the virtues of great black Americans who overcame odds. You know, I repeat your phrase, the phrase you coined often, which is when whites were at their worst, blacks were at their best, and you tell those stories, and we need to hear those stories. But my point is, or my question is, when you hear from the Claudine Gays and the Ketanji Brown Jacksons and the Eddie Glaudes of the world, do you think those positive stories of examples of success, no matter the odds, do you think they're resonating? Or do you think they're getting bottled up by the cultural and civic institutions in this country?
Well, I mean, they are part of the whole grievance industry. They're oriented towards grievance. It pays well. I mean, DEI trainers are all over the place in corporate America, universities, making six-figure salaries, whining and complaining about blacks are not, suitable enough to meet the standards, and therefore true justice in America means dumb down the standards so that we can compete. And it's numbing in its self-loathing of Black America to say that that's the case. But the majority of blacks, I don't buy into it. I think people are wanting to be inspired with examples of how people achieved against the odds. And I keep confronting people like this who talk about that we are defined by the liabilities of slavery and whatnot. And I just give endless examples of the Golden 13, 1941, when naval officers, the blacks could not be naval officers, so the Navy took 16 college-educated black men, and they were going to put them through an 8 weeks, what they would give white cadets 16 weeks in hopes that they would flunk out. When these men found out, they didn't protest. They covered their windows and stayed up all night and studied. And when they were tested, they scored in the 90th percentile, and they said, oh, they cheated, so they tested them individually. They scored in the 93rd percentile. 13 went on to become commissioned officers. But those high test scores are still the highest ever achieved in any class graduating from that training academy. But people like this woman and others who are part of the grievance, it does not fit the race grievance narrative to talk about how blacks achieve success. And we give endless examples. Chicago in 1917, in the Bronzeville section of Chicago, when we were redlined, we have 731 black-owned businesses, $100 million in real estate assets. And this economic success was all over the country. Thomas Sowell, in his new book, Charter Schools and Their Enemies, says from the end of slavery in the United States until approximately 1960, nearly every metric you can use to measure success of a demographic, labor force participation rates, home ownership rates, college education rates, percentage of two-parent households, per capita income, numbers of supervisory jobs, all rose between the end of slavery and 1960, and in some cases exceeding that of whites. So in face of these facts, how can these people make these claims that blacks cannot make it today unless we dumb down the standards?
And I mean, my view, especially the reaction to the Supreme Court decisions, both the student student loan forgiveness decision as well as the college admissions. Well, you have these grievance industry types, as you say, saying, well, now universities are going to become whiter and more Asian. Well, I don't know if that's true or not, but if it turns out to be true, at least at the elite universities, what does that say about the K through 12 system from which they are emanating? And it's the same thing with student debt. If it didn't make sense for you to go 40,000 to 100,000, 200,000 in debt to get this degree from whatever university, then what does that say about the deal? What does that say about the return on investment by getting this degree from the university? So it seems to me so much of this is, as you say, the grievance industry pays them well, but also the institutions they're a part of are failing, and they need a cover story for that failure.
They really do. But also, I mean, as Tom Sowell pointed out, man, there's no such thing as equity. I mean, there are disparities within individual families. He points out of the 29 astronauts, 21 were firstborn. There are not many Asians in the NFL.
Right.
Black men are 6% of the population and 80% of the NFL, 80% of the NBA. Now, why didn't we need a affirmative action to achieve that? Does this mean that they discriminate against white people? But it's only an issue when there are positive disparities. We don't hear anyone explaining. Then when Jackie Robinson was trying to make it in the pros, no one said because blacks weren't in baseball that black players would get 4 strikes and they're out, or that Jim Brown and other football players only have to run 8 yards for a first down. But somehow we can't compete in the classroom and in corporate America. But these facts that we have at the Woodson Center testify that we did achieve under Jim Crow. Walter Williams talks about 5 major black high schools in urban areas in 1920 that had crumbling buildings, used textbooks, overcrowded, and half the budget of white schools. Every one of those 5 high schools out-tested every white high school in those cities. And these were the children of maids, of sharecroppers. And so it's important for us to tell the complete American story by asking ourselves, if we achieved excellence in the presence of these oppressive conditions when racism was enshrined in law, why can't we look back to the future and say, how can we take some of the values and strategies that worked under more adverse conditions and apply them today?
So, in addition to telling stories, where would you suggest people put their energies? Is it in a particular topic area, a particular issue? What should people, everyday people do sort of to advance some of the common sense that you're speaking?
Always look for people who have achieved against the odds, not those who have failed. People are inspired when you see stories of victories that are possible, not constantly remind you of injuries to be avoided. There are all kinds of examples around. Go on our website. If you want to be inspired, go back and look for those who have achieved against the odds. Find out how people were able to build hotels, how they financed their own hospitals and railroads. Just be, develop a passion for looking for people who have achieved against the odds and asking yourself, how did they do that? We look for examples that inspire us.
What's your level of optimism for these debates and the quality of them? The effort amid the efforts by the left to infuse reparations into everything, as Representative Cori Bush did on the 4th of July. Good time to talk about reparations. As you see, what's your level of optimism with the governance of big cities in America, where a majority of the black population is concentrated?
I'm always optimistic because I believe, as Bishop Sheen said, and he gave a very inspiring sermon 50 years ago where he predicted what was happening today. He says the moment there are three pillars of pietas, or patriotism, love of God, love of country, love of neighbor. When any one of them is compromised, the whole deal is compromised. But America's is like, our symbol is the eagle, and it nests high in the mountains. And at a certain point, it pushes its eaglet out, and it falls to the earth. And just before it falls, it crashes, it grabs it and takes it back to the top. And it keeps it up until the eagle learns to fly. He said, America's like that. Just before we're ready to crash, God is going to take us up to the mountain, and we're going to learn to fly. And I think the left is so extreme with this reparations. I think that's what's going to convince America how ridiculous their claims are. And the very fact that they are making such wild and outrageous proposals is an extreme example of what they stand for. They're doing this at a time when the murder rate in the black community is at record highs. It was ironic. I saw on one posting a poster of the reparations, and on top of it, it said 30 people in Baltimore shot over the 4th of July weekend. Mm-hmm. I think the juxtaposition of these black-on-black deaths, this has never happened in the history of the black America. And I think the juxtaposition of the reality of how many blacks are destroying themselves because of the moral and spiritual free fall that's occurring, and the demands for reparation will resonate with the American people. That's why 3/4 of American people are opposed to reparations. And I think it's going to stimulate that kind of a backlash. And I think the backlash will go in the directions of seeking more moral competence.
He is Bob Woodson, founder and president of the Woodson Center and 1776 Unites, author of Red, White, and Black, Rescuing American History from Revisionists and Race Hustlers. Bob, thanks as always. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
So what's the trouble here, mister? I don't understand what happened. I checked my stuff in Chicago, and when we landed in L.A., I came to baggage claim, and there it was, my $10,000 Canoma analyzer in pieces, completely trashed. Just the facts, buddy. What did you have it backed in? Well, just the box it came in, but there was all this foam and thick cardboard